here we go. Another Insider Notebook. James Palmer here with you with Bleacher Report. Man, did we have an extravaganza yesterday, live all day on Bleacher Report. I want to thank everybody that had me on all the shows throughout the course of the day. The producers, Taya, Ian, crushed it. And we're going to come really today with the follow-up. What happened and what didn't happen yesterday on the final day before that trade deadline that was at 4 o'clock Eastern yesterday. There were 10 trades finalized on the last day. Now, it's funny because I was hearing from a variety of people just texting throughout the day, different general managers, different executives, different assistant general managers, pro personnel people. What are you thinking? What are you hearing? I don't know. It might be quiet. I don't know. There might be something, but I think it might be kind of quiet. No, the exact opposite of quiet. Major moves were made. Quinnen Williams goes over to the Cowboys. Sauce Gardner goes over to the Colts. We have a number of receivers on the move, whether it's Jacoby Myers or Rashid Shaheed. There was a lot of action going on throughout the league, but there were some teams, everybody's still kind of scratching their head going, why didn't my team make a move? And that's where we're going to focus a little bit today on some of the things that maybe that didn't happen. Remember, you can jump in the chat. You can ask me anything you want. In between each and every one of these topics, I'll try to get in there and try to answer as many as I can. Hopefully it's jumping like it has been this entire week, and you're curious about what happened with your team. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of main stars that stayed put, ones that we maybe thought were going to be on the move, ones that a lot of teams hoped were going to be on the move because of the star power that they bring. Why weren't they moved, and why are they still with the team that they were with before Tuesday? Part of that is also going to include Brian Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville. This has become kind of an interesting story, something interesting to follow. And we're going to tell you a little bit about what his future is and maybe what transpired on Tuesday that makes us kind of scratch our heads a little bit. The Broncos, I kind of put out a couple of little things there because I was hearing from different sources that they may be making a move. They may be looking to make a splash. Ended up not doing it. I'll tell you why they didn't coming up. And then Breece Hall, he's kind of, Will Smith there standing, just looking around the empty house and in Bel Air with all his friends are gone, the two key pieces of that defense. And we'll talk about Breece Hall and his future specifically, and then Chris Olave, what's next for the receiver in New Orleans that actually stayed put, not Rashid Shaheed. Okay, let's start with the stars who stayed put, and I'm going to start with Trey Hendrickson. I think a lot of people are curious about Trey and maybe why he wasn't on the move. If you look at the way the standings are, if you look at the win-loss record of the Cincinnati Bengals, you saw them move Logan Wilson. Why wasn't he next? All right, here's the understanding. They wanted a first-round pick for him. They did kind of lessen that a little bit as Monday night transpired into Tuesday. I think it could have been happened for a second-round pick. That was possibly a move that a team could have made. But you have to remember a couple of things that were part of that. You were probably going to have to give up that second-round pick, or potentially they were wanting more, but I think they were going to be fine with a second-round pick. You were going to have to take on, because they didn't restructure his contract before the deadline on Monday, where you could have changed some of that into a signing bonus and given him his cash, or restructured his deal into some sort of bonuses that would have lowered the price in terms of dollars and cap space to the acquiring team. Well, they never did that, so you were going to have to give up the second-round pick. You have to pay him $10 million in cash roughly for the rest of this season. You're going to take the $10 million cap hit as well. These are all parts of the equation that teams were thinking. And then, yes, he's a free agent after the season, so you're essentially giving up all of that for, yes, a very, very good player, but essentially a rental possibly. And that's where things kind of slowed down. The other part is, I started to get the sense that this never really was going to happen. I do believe Trey Hendrickson was ready to play elsewhere. I think he was ready to be traded. I think he was ready to play in another uniform the second half of this year with the way things have gone in Cincinnati. But it doesn't happen. And really what we ended up seeing, in all honesty, is the Bengals did exactly what they always do. They don't like to give away players that make them worse in the middle of the season. Duke Tobin always thinks that they have a chance. He always feels like he wants to give them the best chance to win each and every week moving forward. He did exactly what we've seen him do in the past. They're just never really sellers. Whether it's realistic in your mind or my mind or anyone else's mind, Cincinnati likes to keep the idea that they are going to be in it in some capacity, and they still have Joe Burrow possibly coming back in the middle of December. And if they are somehow, in this thing, in the division, then it was the right move. We do know Trey Hendrickson can be a closer in games. He makes this defense better. They're absolutely giving up on the season if they would have traded him. So again, that goes against what we've seen from the past of the Cincinnati Bengals. And Joe Flacco has this offense, since he became their starter, the best offense in football. So those are all kind of the reasons why He ended up not getting moved, and they really just stayed with exactly who they are. They didn't change their stripes, I guess. And Trey Hendrickson ends up staying, even though I believe he was prepared to play elsewhere, and maybe I would say even excited to potentially play elsewhere, as he has the expiring contract and Cincinnati is where it's at. I'll touch on AJ Brown real quick, and I see this chat going, so we're going to go on to it. And jump in here as soon as I hit on AJ Brown. This was never really something that was going to happen. And I know we've talked about it on a number of chats leading in to the trade deadline, and everybody was kind of curious. That was more or less decision makers in other buildings wondering if Philadelphia was going to change course, wondering if this thing was going to get to a point to where Howie Roseman felt like he had to make a move. That was always just a curiosity from outside the building. Philadelphia never really gave anybody, to my understanding, any sort of belief that they would have a chance at landing A.J. Brown. I think Howie Roseman said it best yesterday when he was asked. He wanted to talk about the players that they acquired, but he did answer the question when asked about A.J. Brown. He said that, he wears a C for a reason. He's an important part of this team and this organization. He cares about winning. He cares about his teammates. And I think that when you're a team like ours that is looking forward to an opportunity to compete for a championship, you just don't get rid of the guys like that. And so they were never really going to get rid of A.J. Brown. He was never going to be moved. I know obviously there's some things behind the scenes that some people are looking at, but that Philly handles them maybe better than anybody. And you also have to look at this other aspect that was, to me, I think worth noting, no matter how bad you thought it was behind the scenes. The contract. The dead money was going to be $43.5 million if he were traded. That money would all accelerate into the Eagles' 2026 cap hit. That would be 15% of their projected cap for 2026. They weren't going to make the move. You have to remember that he does have $29 million fully guaranteed in 2026, another $4 million fully guaranteed in 27. So he was always going to stay. That was just more some noise from outside the building. All right, lots of chats in here. Let's see what we got. Did the Titans make any more moves? They can't make any more moves. I got a text from inside that building kind of in the last 15 minutes going, I think we're done. There was some talk about Calvin Ridley. I think they wanted Cam Ward to actually have some pieces around him to make some sort of progress in this rookie season with everything that's going on with the head coaching change. I don't think they really wanted a full-on fire sale. I think the Draymond Jones was a big move that the Ravens went and got, and I think that was some capital that they did acquire on a player that was there on a one-year deal for $8.5 million. So they move on from Draymond Jones. I actually texted with him a little bit. He's excited to head over to Baltimore and see if he can help them up front. I think Arden Key was a hot name. But it ended up not transpiring at all. Obviously, they gave up Roger McCreary on the back end, so they did make a couple of moves. They certainly did as they try to flip this thing and where they're at. Where the Texans had any talks, I didn't hear them come up a whole lot, in all honesty. I know there was some offensive line talk, and really the only offensive lineman that was moved was Trevor Penning there right before the deadline, right at the end by the Chargers. It's hard to get offensive line help at the deadline. I think we talked about that a lot through a lot of our streams leading into the deadline, just how difficult it is, and that was kind of what they were looking at. And the price on some of these running backs was a little bit higher than maybe a lot of these teams were willing to go with. Let's see a lot of Texans here. Vikings should have got B. Hall. You'd have to remember everything that Minnesota spent in the offseason. I mean, they spent an insane amount of money to bolster their offensive line and their defensive line, and they're already paying, obviously, a top-tier receiver. They have Aaron Jones. They have a lot of pieces. They really went out and spent as much as possible to surround J.J. McCarthy with as much as they could. But the interesting part was there were some people that I was getting texts from in the morning that were kind of saying, hey, keep an eye on Minnesota. They might be a little bit aggressive. They ended up not making any moves there. Packers called about Njoku, though. Nope. Njoku, though. Okay, seen that. Danny Dimes, we could talk about that if you'd like. Any word on people calling about Chuba Hubbard? I think the contract maybe scared some people away a little bit, and I don't think, where the Panthers are at right now, we're really trying to be all that much of sellers. Eagles were buyers for a repeat. Why would they sell a number one? Exactly. They were never going to. By the way, I'll say this about Philly real quick. I don't think you'd have a better bye week. They did not play a football game this past week. They got Brandon Graham out of retirement, and now he's going to be ready heading into this week for the rest of the season. One of their better edge rushers from last season comes out of retirement. Nolan Smith gets his practice window opened up, so that's two guys added to the edge group. We'll see when Nolan can actually come on to the practice field, but he's going to start practicing this week. They get Jaylen Phillips in the trade. That's three edge rushers. Then they had issues on the back end in the secondary. They end up making trades for two different guys in that secondary to become more versatile and deeper when they go and get Yair Alexander and Michael Carter. And then on top of it, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Commanders, the Packers, and the Lions all lost. What a week for Philadelphia without even playing a football game. Chiefs fans here, do the Jets want to extend Brees? We will get to Brees. That's a big part. And Chiefs fan, I will tell you that I'm going to bring up your name, the Chiefs, in that. Brian Thomas Jr.'s future. Let's get to that. And I know there's a lot in here. I love this. Bro always looks away when my chat pops up. All right, what's your chat? Let me find it. Yeah, this bro right here. Let's see. Oh, wait. How many wide receivers did Denver try to get? Olave really wasn't available. I will get to Denver in a minute. Bro did not look away for your chat. Brian Thomas Jr., this was kind of an interesting one, everybody. Like, this is a guy that was third in the NFL in receiving a season ago, tied for sixth in touchdowns, and his name kind of started popping up a little bit. And some teams were texting me going, what do you think the asking price is? I think it was a 1. I'm not sure, though, Shad Khan would have signed off on it. I think this is an interesting one to keep an eye on. There's a new regime there. It's not the group that drafted him. You have an aggressive general manager in James Gladstone. You saw him go and make the move for Travis Hunter. You saw him go and make the move for Jacoby Myers. You start making, some questions in your head going, does Liam Cohen and James Gladstone like Brian Thomas Jr.? Is he a fit for what they want to do offensively? I think it's fair to ask that question because there's plenty of people around the league, scouts and executives that are going, what has happened this year? It's very different than last season. What's happened with Brian Thomas Jr.? There's been some drops. There's been some inconsistencies. There's some people I've talked to that said, I did see the chances of that happening. It happened in college, that it would happen in the league as well. And people are kind of seeing, is this going to be the right fit? I think that was a rich ask, maybe, but I think maybe just floated out there to see if that's potential. If Travis Hunter can become what he can become, that would maybe be your number one receiver. You'll see. But I don't think they were really I don't think anything really percolated to the extent of having a real trade discussion, but I do think his name did get bounced around a little bit, which I think is fascinating. And then the other part, you make the move for Jacoby Myers, which is, we'll see, somewhat maybe of a rental. He didn't want to be in Vegas anymore. He made that pretty clear and ends up going there for a 4th and a 6th to Jacksonville. And he's a guy that does the dirty work over the middle, in the traffic over the middle, can help you in the intermediate game. These are all kind of things that I think Jacksonville's wondering, why isn't Brian Thomas Jr. filling these for us? And so I think an interesting move there, but obviously they're banged up at receiver a little bit too with BTJ at the ankle and IR for Travis Hunter. But I think this is something to keep an eye on maybe after the season as well. All right, did the Giants call about Waddle, any other wide receivers? I didn't get the sense that they were going to be overly aggressive, and I don't think they really were. A few teams called on Waddle, and then we'll get to it right here because this is the Broncos' pursuit of a trade, and Waddle's really the main thing we're talking about here. There were several teams that called on Waddle. I would say with Champ Kelly as the acting general manager, he listened to those. I don't think Chris Greer was really listening to them, any of those calls that were inquiring about Waddle. And so I'll just jump the Broncos real quick and go straight to the whole Waddle situation and go back to how Denver played into that. My understanding is that they considered moving him for the right price. I don't think they wanted a full fire sale in Miami. They already moved Jaylen Phillips. I do think they thought about it. I think it was like a really high asking price, and that's why they were going to listen if anybody was going to come up to that price. I think they were going to have to get, completely blown away by whatever offer was there. But I was still I still didn't think he was going to get moved. I thought somebody was really going to have to overpay. But the reason I started thinking there was a small chance is talking to a number of people around the league that make these decisions, it was this. It's actually not a terrible contract. When you look at the $36 million he's owed through the second half of the season and all of next season, that number combined for those two things, very reasonable for a player of his caliber with the wide receiver prices have just skyrocketed. So people I talked to were like, he's a really great player. The contract's phenomenal. It wouldn't be an awful thought if you try to do it, but then they're not the ones making the call. That was just asking their opinion on Waddle. And you're going to have to give up probably a 1 or maybe more than that, but probably a 1 to land Jaylen Waddle. And that's what probably scared most of the teams away. Again, a couple of called. They wanted to see what was where with Waddle. He can play in any offense. I think he's still very valuable to what Tua and Mike McDaniel want to do. So I think that was in the back of their head as well. And here's the deal. For what teams were hearing the price is at this deadline, they could probably get that same amount for Jaylen Waddle at the end of the season. after the season is over, and teams can know exactly where that draft pick is going to be when they see where Miami finishes this season. They could probably get the same compensation, so I wouldn't completely write off Jaylen Waddle leaving Miami because they were listening and because they could probably get the same compensation after the season. How Denver plays into that, and I know there's a lot of questions here about Denver. Falcons really weren't doing anything at all, to my understanding at all. Rams attempt to make any moves. Not really. That corner move to get Roger McCreary was really kind of what they were looking to do. That was kind of what I had heard. Did the Patriots almost make a move on anybody? Like, they were going to be very strategic. New England was going to be very strategic in what they were going to do. They wanted to get somebody that was not just going to be any sort of rental. They wanted to be a part of their future, maybe 2026 and possibly beyond. But I didn't think they were going to overreach. I had heard kind of in the morning that maybe there could be a moderate move, whether it's a pass rusher or somebody for running back depth. They actually ended up not doing it at all. But, oh my God, they just got Max Crosby, according to the chat. Sean Payton and George Payton, to my understanding, kind of kicked around the idea of maybe Jaylen Waddle or maybe saying some sort of, piece. I didn't really get a sense exactly what it was, but I think you can put the pieces together going, where is the hole on this team? Probably the other receiver spot, and that's where a lot of that buzz started. And I think Sean Payton kind of said, yeah, George and I kind of, discussed a couple of things and saw what was going on and kind of just stayed pat. I think the reason we were connecting the dots here is we were hearing some buzz about it. Certainly, I was. They're sitting at 7-2 atop the AFC West. You see Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs kind of struggling right now out of the gate in the first half of the season. Do you strike while the iron's hot? Do you try to make sure you can push your team over the edge in an AFC that's kind of up in the air? I can see that. Do you try to consider making your team better by making a splash play when the timing is right? I can see that consideration there as well. And number 2 receiver has been a hot topic. Sean Payton says that they are invested in that spot with their youngsters. I think they need these guys to grow, and so they want to play Troy Franklin. They want to play Pat Bryant. They want to play Marvin Mims. You saw the confidence they had in these 3 when before the season they traded away Devon Vele, who was their second leading receiver from a season ago. So it does kind of make sense, but I do think they kind of considered some things. I don't know about to the extent they did, but I do think the idea was kind of considered, and some people in the building got kind of excited. Why didn't the Packers get a cornerback? Cornerback market was really, really tough. I think you saw that when you saw Philly jump early for Michael Carter, who is just most likely going to be a cap casualty anyways. You saw the Rams jump and Roger McCreary early, and then you saw, obviously, the splash that the Colts made for Sauce. It was a market that didn't have a whole lot going on there, and you had to figure out a way to do something there. Mike Tomlin, a window shopper. He wanted to shop. Yeah, he said it in his press conference yesterday. They were one of the teams that I was told was going to be aggressive. I was told that Steelers were going to be aggressive. Buffalo was going to be aggressive. Minnesota was going to be aggressive. Seattle was going to be aggressive towards a wide receiver, and that one worked. And I want to say this, and just maybe listen to this if your team didn't make a trade. Just because I hear your team's going to be aggressive and your general manager is aggressive and is out there trying to improve his team and fill a hole that is in that roster, you have to remember 2 teams need to make the trade. You can't just do it on your own. You need the other side to agree to it. And all of these general managers more or less have certain compensation levels that they're willing to go up to and will not go beyond. And they feel like that's the most I'm going to pay for this receiver. If the asking price stays too high, they won't do the deal. And so think about it like this. Don't get mad if they didn't make a deal, because oftentimes the same people that get mad they didn't make a deal are saying, I can't believe they overpaid for player X. And so that's where this kind of works. Like, doesn't mean that Brandon Beane wasn't trying. He was hard. And it doesn't mean the Steelers weren't trying. They were, but there were limited options, and there's only a certain amount you're going to be willing to go to. And I think that plays a really big part in all of this. Tampa was never really going to make any sort of moves. They weren't really all that interested. The Bills were they were calling. They were trying to see what was going on. No problem for answering your question. I try to do as much. So no rumors on who the Pats wanted. I didn't really get the sense that they were all that heavily in. And so, there's a little, I won't say it. Not enough old outs and Lambert's bill for the Steelers. Hey, I like what the Steelers did in their adjustments, by the way, in putting Duggar. They did make a move, getting Kyle Duggar back there with Jalen Ramsey. Those guys playing safety. Ramsey's going to play safety moving forward. I think this defense plays a little bit better at the lineup that they have now and where they're at. Let's get to the Breece Hall drama. We're about 10 minutes left in this. Love all your questions, by the way. Here we go. Brees Hall. This is going to be related to our co-pilot question. I asked co-pilot, prior to November of 2025, when was the last time the Jets made a blockbuster trade? According to co-pilot, the last blockbuster trade made by the Jets occurred on July 25th, 2020. You all know who it was. All-pro safety Jamal Adams to the Seahawks. Actually paid off well, actually, for the Jets, if you think about it. And so, Brees Hall, why wasn't he moved? Where's the drama? I don't know how much drama there is. He is upset, I guess, in some capacity about the fire sale that went on from general manager Darren Muji, who he tweeted out, sick about my brothers, I guess that would be, with two Ds. Man, happy for them, but man, I'm sick right now. I think he has a chance to probably most likely not be a Jet next year. They stood pretty firm about the third-round pick they were looking there. They stood pretty firm about the second-round pick that they were looking for Jermaine Johnson. You got to remember, like these are high picks, and then you don't have control of Brees Hall after the 2025 season. That's a valuable pick. A third-round pick, if you're a good organization, is a starter and a very, very good starter if you make the right selection, and that player's on a rookie contract for 4 seasons. So I think you have to remember that these are valuable picks that teams don't really want to fully give up. I think the Jets stood firm with that, and I don't think they ever really came all that close on a deal for Brees Hall. I think that kind of shows us a little bit of the running back market, a little bit about where teams thought the market was at that position. I think that usually is a telltale sign. Now, I think there were some people, and I mentioned this in the streams coming into the deadline, there were people in that building going, maybe we should hang on to Brees Hall. Maybe we're better off hanging on to him. I think they did start thinking that a little bit. The thinking of just giving him away kind of disappeared, and they were going to be firm about it, and they were going to have specific asking prices. Because I think with Darren Muji, even though what he did was giving away Quentin Williams, but he got unreal capital for him in a first and a second round pick. And then he goes and gives up Sauce Gardner for 2 first-round picks. I think he can still sell the locker room. Look, guys, I know these are really, really good players, but look at the return we got as how we're going to rebuild this, and we got multiple assets back for both of these players. I don't think you want to show your locker room they're just going to turn around and sell Brees Hall for a very low number. So they stood firm at the third-round pick. The Chiefs kind of were interested. Back to your question there. The Chiefs were interested. And I think the Chiefs were making somewhat of what they thought were very acceptable offers. Nothing ended up coming into fruition. I know Brett Veach is also somebody that stands firm about where he thinks the proper compensation should be. And I wouldn't be surprised if they made a run at him in the offseason. If Kansas City made a run at Brees Hall in the offseason. So we'll see. But he ended up not going anywhere. And he is a back that still is going to play a part in this offense, certainly. And he knows he's playing for 31 other teams as well, because I don't know if he's going to be back with those 2 young backs. So I think you're going to get the most out of Brees Hall, honestly, as he's playing for a lot of teams. And maybe if KC's still interested and he hears this, maybe he wants to go play with a team that consistently finds themselves playing in the postseason. I think Hall walks in free agency. Yep, I kind of said that. Any news about the Houston Texans? Didn't really hear much about them at all. I heard Kansas City try to give them a 4th. That's about pretty much what it was. Did the Lions make any moves? Not really. I know they were looking at pass rushers opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. They wanted to be deeper in their front 7. I know they were looking at secondary help as well, because they were in on some of those moves. They were in on trying to get Raj McCreary, and so they did try. I mean, again, a lot of teams try. Did the Chargers try for anything other than Penning? There really weren't a whole lot of options out there in terms of the offensive line. It's just so difficult to get offensive line help at the deadline. They did get some. This is more of a depth piece because Penning has played tackle. He has played guard, so he's done kind of both of those things. So this does help them in their depth in some capacity. Did anyone try and get Jerome Ford? I didn't hear much. I know that Cleveland was kind of like a buyer and a seller and kind of listening on both sides of their mouth there, going, seeing what they could give and what they could get. But Jerome Ford ends up staying, even though the running back spot there has shifted. Oftentimes, you got to remember the compensatory pick situation that plays into this as well. I wish Olave was gone. Also, okay, we'll get to Olave right now. How close were the Eagles truly to getting Myles Garrett, or was that just a rumor? That was certainly a rumor. The $61 million in dead cap money that would have hit the Cleveland Browns would have been astronomical. Those were certainly rumors, for sure. Can you please recap the BTJ future? Missed it. He's there. they'd like to see him play better. I think his name definitely came up in some conversations, which was fascinating for a guy that played as well as he did in his rookie season. And you have him as a cost control asset at a very expensive position for a number of years. I think it's going to be something we keep an eye on, maybe after this offseason. It could be, who knows, or it could be nothing. But I think the buzz about it was worth noting and where they're at. Were we ever close with a Hendrickson trade? Not nearly as close as I thought we were going to get once I started hearing it going down to a 2, but it never really got to anything to where it developed. All right, Chris Olave's future. We had said this repeatedly. We had said this a lot leading into this deadline, that of the 3 receivers, he was by far the least likely to be moved out of the 3 in New Orleans, whether that is Brandon Cooks, or that is Rashid Shaheed, or that is Chris Olave. Shaheed ends up moving for a 4th and a 5th. They were looking for a 3rd from him, which that kind of comes a little bit to the equivalence of it. And I had kind of heard some buzz that he wasn't looking to re-sign with New Orleans. I had mentioned in some streams here and hinted at that, going, I don't know if both of them re-sign. So you kind of look for Chris Olave and the type of player that he is. I think they're both very good. I think maybe teams that I talked to thought maybe Olave was a little bit better, and it looks like New Orleans is most likely going to try to hang on to him for whatever quarterback they're going to be playing in 2026. It looks like he is most likely going to stay put. He will lose his running mate in Rashid Shaheed. This gives me an opportunity to talk about that. I think the Seahawks, when I started hearing they were going to be very aggressive yesterday morning and it was going to be towards a wide receiver, I think everybody started, who's just a fan of football, going, this offense is outstanding. This defense has pretty much everything. Their front, interior on the defensive line is great. Could they maybe, add a guard to help this offensive line? Possibly. But if they get another receiver, with the way Sam Darnold's playing, with the way Clint Kubiak is calling this offense, look out. And now I think they put a lot of teams on notice with as aggressive as they were going after Rashid Shaheed. I do want to mention that no contract talks have really happened between Jacoby Myers and the Jags, Rashid Shaheed and the Seahawks. So right now these are intentionally rentals because they're not under contract after the 2025 season. Okay, we got like 2 minutes to go here. I'll just answer a bunch of chats if you got them. Were the Pats close to making deals? I heard that they were not going to be very, very active. It looked like that ended up being the case. I think they would have went for some depth and some help maybe at the pass rusher spot, but I'd kind of heard that they weren't going to be super, super active, and maybe they'd make a move, but ended up not doing anything like most teams, honestly, ended up doing. Did Achane ever really come up in trade talks? No, he really did not. The Eagles calling about Max Crosby. Crosby was unavailable. The Raiders made that clear to the rest of the league, really there. I didn't hear much about the Panthers. Was Baltimore calling on Reek Woolen? I did not hear that. Possibly didn't hear that though. Did you hear anything on the Bills? They worked the phones, man. They worked the phones for sure. And we're looking to see if they could do something, but ended up not making a move. You have to remember, Buffalo gave up a 3rd round pick for Amari Cooper a season ago. And that's a lot of capital. And you're going to do that at the deadline each and every year. That's tough. I mean, that's hard to deal with that. Were we ever close on a Hendrickson trade? No. Where are we at here? Let's get to the bottom. Let's see if there's any new stuff. And Minnesota and Addison come up in any trade talks. I don't really see it. I think Naylor was the one that maybe a lot of people thought would be the one that would possibly move, but no. Colts no fly zone. It's going to be super fun to watch what happens with Sauce Gardner there. I just want to tell you this. When Ward comes back and you have Sauce, guys that can play man, guys that can do a couple different things. They can play press, they can play off, and we can see Lou Anarumo get in his bag like he did in those years where he had a really experienced secondary. Remember, we had like Jesse Bates and Von Bell and all those different guys in that secondary that were confusing the hell out of Patrick Mahomes. He might be able to get back into that, and then he can continue to do the things that he does, which is mix things up. You see something one way for half the game, then you see it the same way pre-snap as the quarterback, and then it's completely different post-snap. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens. Let me see here. What else we got? Mentioned the Patriots, certainly did. What else do we have here? The only no-fly zone will ever be the Denver Broncos. So it's funny, there was people bringing up the no-fly zone, like using that term with this Colts secondary now, and Bradley Roby, Buckeye, by the way, good dude. I saw him tweet out like, hey, you all better remember there's only one no-fly zone ever, and that was the Broncos Super Bowl 50 team of that no-fly zone with Talib and Roby and Chris Harris and D Stu and TJ Ward. I mean, whew, what a group that was. The Chiefs did look around. There wasn't a whole lot of D-line help, certainly, that was available, in all honesty. Was an AJ Brown trade even an option? Nope, it was not. Damn right, you're exactly right. And I didn't miss over your chats. I didn't look away. We are well over here. What we got here? No matter what, you got to stop the run game. Indy Jones gets hit. He goes crazy like Dak. No clutch. I don't know what that kind of means, but I kind of get it. Appreciate everybody joining us. Appreciate everybody that's been with me each and every day leading into the trade deadline and into this one. It has been just really, really, really fun to watch. Did Fitzpatrick? No, I think you're talking about Minka. I didn't see that really there. Kyler Murray trade. I think we're going to be reevaluating Kyler Murray in Arizona after the season, certainly. And we can get to that. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, next Wednesday. So appreciate all of you. I'm going to bounce. Enjoy your Wednesday and enjoy your week 10 week of football. Take it easy.